And we should warn our viewers, you might find the following report upsetting.
A woman wails on the floor of the Mujtahid hospital. My mother, she's been missing for 14 years, she says. Where is she? Where's my brother? Where's my husband? Where are they? Dr. Ahmed Abdullah shows us into the morgue, where about 35 bodies have been brought in. Discovered in a military hospital days after the regime fell, they are believed to be some of the last victims of Bashar al-Assad. Take a look. This is the crime of the regime, he says. Even in the Middle Ages, they didn't torture people like this. Another man points to their tattered clothing, evidence, he says, that most were detainees at the much-feared Sednaya prison. Even in death, they are still only identified by numbers. Everyone here heard about the horrors that took place in Assad's notorious prisons, but to see it up close is something entirely different.
A lot of them have bruises, have horrible wounds that seem to be consistent with torture. I just saw one woman retching as she came out of the other room. Families are now going through trying to see if their loved ones are here.
There's not enough room for all of them in the morgue, so a makeshift area has been set up outside. More and more families stream in, the light from their cell phones the only way of identifying the dead. My only son, I don't have another. They took him for 12 years now, just because he said no. 12 years, my only son, this woman shouts. I don't know anything about him. I ask Allah to burn him, she says of Assad. Burn him and his sons, like he burned my heart. A crowd swarms when they see our camera. Everyone here has lost someone.
All of these people are asking us to take the names of their loved ones to help them try to find them.
It is a mark of desperation. Such is the need for answers. But finding those answers will not be easy. At the military intelligence facility known as the Palestine Branch, officers burned documents and destroyed hard drives before fleeing. But their terror was on an industrial scale. Troves and troves of prisoner files remain. It will take investigators years to go through them. Below ground, more clues, etched on the walls of cells that look more like dungeons. So you can see this list of names of, it looks like 93 prisoners here. There's also a schedule for keeping the cell tidy and just graffiti everywhere, people trying to leave marks for someone to find. Down here, insects are the only life form that thrives. It's clear that anyone who could survive this will never be the same again. The cells are empty, but the doors are finally open. And the quest for answers is just beginning. Now, Jake, as you can see from that story, the Assad regime was very studious about documenting its extensive crimes. But the question now becomes, when do investigators get to come into Syria? When do human rights workers get to come into Syria and really start to tackle the job of going through all of that documentation, and also to what end? At one stage, the dream for many Syrians may have been to see Bashar al-Assad one day face his day in court. Now, with Assad in Moscow, that becomes increasingly unlikely. But there are activists in Syria who say, okay, but we're still going to go after the system, the apparatus behind him. And in order for them to do that, one possibility would be for the rebels here to essentially cede this territory as ICC jurisdiction, or being under ICC, the International Criminal Court jurisdiction. We saw Ukraine do this as well. We don't know if that's on the cards at the moment. And all of this clearly a very long, drawn-out process. But at least now Syrians are entering the phase where they can start to really think about how they go about getting justice for what they've been through, Jake.
Amazing. Clarissa Ward in Damascus, thank you so much. Another important report. Let's bring in Kareem Shaheen. He's a writer and editor for New Lines magazine focused on the Middle East. He's covered Syria for years, including the chemical attack in Syria in 2017. Kareem, so where did all the Assad loyalists go? The prison guards, the police, the government officials? Do you think they're in hiding? Did they flee? Are they trying to camouflage themselves? What do you think?
Yeah, so a number of them are in hiding. Obviously, the rebels also gave a general amnesty to most of the conscripts, so a lot of them just share uniforms. And one other difficulty is that former loyalists are now all of a sudden, pro-revolution. Even Manal al-Assad, who's the wife of Maher al-Assad, Bashar's brother and very brutal enforcer. A few days ago, she posted on Instagram, cheering on for the Syrian military. And then yesterday, she posted, the traitor to his country has fled, long live free Syria, with a picture of the Syrian flag, of the Free Syrian flag. And so, a lot of these loyalists are in hiding. Some of them are posting some videos indicating that they are still alive, that they're still around. And the rebels have put up a bounty on a number of them, particularly the ones that have taken part in some of the worst atrocities of the past 14 years.
Well, let me ask you about Bashar al-Assad's sister-in-law there. I mean, do you think the rebels will buy it?
I don't think they will, but it's a question that's going to be a crucial part of transitional justice and moving on from the conflict. People are very keen to see the worst atrocities. The people who are running these prisons, they're essentially concentration camps. They're very keen on seeing these people held to account. It's very important that a lot of this documentation that I was talking about is protected and preserved. A lot of the crimes of the past 14 years have been archived and cataloged by many different organizations. And so the question of how to deal with these loyalists, from all the way to the top, the people who are in charge of these security agencies, the prison wardens, the jailers, and all the way down to the people who are just following orders, if you will, what the rebels are going to do with them is going to be a key component of their pathway going forward, because a lot of people won't be okay with simply, burying the past and burying the last 14 years of suffering. This is one of the most brutal, totalitarian regimes that have ever been conceived, really, by humanity, and the crimes that they've committed, as we're seeing now from Saydnaya and the dozens of other prisons that have been uncovered, are, truly horrific.
And another outstanding question, of course, has to do with the rebels themselves. Biden administration officials today continuing to express skepticism about Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, or HTS. That's the group now in charge of Syria that the U.S. considers to be a terrorist group. What are you hearing about the leader, Mohammed al-Julani? His real name is Ahmad al-Sharaa. And what do you think his real intentions are for Syria, if you have any idea?
Yeah, I think, as everybody knows, he originally started out as part of a splinter group from ISIS, from the Islamic State in Iraq at the time, pledged allegiance to Al-Qaeda before severing ties with the transnational jihadist network, and he then moved on essentially to try and reform his group into more of a national liberation movement rather than a terrorist group as we know in the West. But and from all indications, people who've been following the group very closely over the past few years believe that this move away from Al-Qaeda is genuine. I think it raises a lot of very important questions for the U.S. and for Western countries that want to see a free democratic Syria in the future. The institutions that we built as part of the war on terror were meant to prevent another 9/11 attack. But in response, a lot of groups, a lot of jihadist groups, a lot of fundamentalist religious groups have transformed themselves, and they've turned themselves into national liberation movements rather than movements that have an interest in attacking American interests abroad. And so now we're faced with the question of dealing with Hayat Tahrir al-Sham and with other similar groups like the Taliban, for instance, and trying to revise the understandings and the institutions that we've built as part of the war on terror to deal with this new type of group that isn't interested in attacking America. And I think it's going to be a huge challenge for Western policymakers, but we need to address that challenge pretty soon. The rebels are already in talks with the Russians about retaining access to a military base in the Mediterranean, and if we don't act swiftly, we're going to lose a key opportunity here to build up relationship with a key group that's going to be running Syria in the coming years.